About 5 years ago, I lived downtown in a major city in the United States. I've always been a night person, so I would often find myself bored after my roommate, who was decidedly not a night person, went to sleep. To pass time, I used to go for long walks and spend the time thinking. I spent 4 years like that walking alone at night, and never once had a reason to feel afraid. I always used to joke with my roommate that even the drug dealers in DC were polite. But all of that changed in just a few minutes of one evening. It was a Wednesday, somewhere around 1 or 2 in the morning, and I was walking near a police-patrolled park, quite ways from my apartment. It was quiet even for a weeknight, with very little traffic and almost no one on foot. The park, as it was most nights, was completely empty. I turned down a short side street in order to route back to my apartment when I first noticed him. At the far end of the street, on my side, was a silhouette of a man dancing. It was a strange dance, similar to a waltz, but he finished each box with a odd four-old stride. I guess you could say he was like dance walking, headed straight towards me. Deciding he was probably drunk, I stepped as close as I could to the road and to give him the majority of the sidewalk to pass me by. The closer he got, I realized how gracefully he was moving. He was very tall and lanky and wearing an old suit. He danced closer still, until I could make out his face. His eyes were open and wide and wild, and his head tilted back slightly, looking off at the sky. His mouth was formed in a painfully wide cartoon of a smile, between the eyes and the smile. I decided to cross the street before he could dance any closer, and I took my eyes off him to cross the empty street. As I reached the other side, I glanced back and then stopped dead in my tracks. He had stopped dancing and was standing on one foot in the street, perfectly parallel to me. He was facing me, but still looking skyward, his smile still wide on his lips. I was completely and utterly unnerved by this. I started walking again, but I kept my eyes on the man. He didn't move, but once I put about a half of a block between us, I turned away from him for a moment to watch the sidewalk in front of me. The street ahead of me was completely empty. Still unnerved, I looked back to see where he was standing, to find him gone. For the brief of moments, I was relieved, until I noticed him. He had crossed the street and was slightly crouched down. I couldn't tell for sure due to the distance and shadows, but I was certain he was facing me. I had looked away from him for no more than 10 seconds, so it was clear that he moved fast. I was so shocked that I stood there for some time staring at him, and then he started moving toward me again. He took giant exaggerated tiptoe steps, as if he was a cartoon character sneaking up on someone. Except he was moving very, very quickly. I like to say at this point, I ran away or pulled out my pepper spray or my cell phone or anything like that, but I didn't. I just stood there completely frozen as the smiling man crept toward me. And then he stopped again, about a car length away from me, still smiling, his smile still looking up in the sky. When I finally found my voice, I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. What I meant to ask was, "What do you want?" in a angry, commanding tone. What came out was a whimper. What? Regardless of whether or not humans can smell fear, they can certainly hear it. I heard it in my own voice, and not only made me more afraid, but he didn't react to it at all. He just stood there smiling. And then, after what felt like forever, he turned away. He turned around very slowly and started dance walking away. Just like that. Not wanting to turn my back around again, I just watched him go until he was far enough away to almost be out of sight. And then I realized something. He wasn't moving away anymore, nor was he dancing. I watched in horror as the distant shape of him grew larger and larger. He was coming back my way. And this time, he was running. I ran too. I ran until I was off on the sidewalk and back on a better lit road with sparse traffic. Looking behind me, he was nowhere to be found. The rest of the way home, I kept glancing over my shoulder, always expecting to see his stupid smile. But he was never there. I lived in that city for 6 months after that night, and I never went out for another walk again. There was just something about his face that always haunted me. He didn't look drunk. He didn't look high. He looked completely and utterly insane. And that's a very, very scary thing to see.